If our second panel on industry can start assembling, I'd like to introduce Kathleen McLaughlin, who's going to chair the panel discussion.
Great. Well,
okay. I'm just going to give you a note on the time. Do you want him to? So we'll put the timer.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
5 minutes left.
Good. Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to my esteemed panelists for joining. I'll introduce myself. I'm Kathleen McLaughlin. I have two roles with Walmart. So I'm the president of the Walmart Foundation. So I was listening closely to the last conversation thinking, oh, I'd love to get in there too. And then I'm also the chief sustainability officer for Walmart, the company. And I have those two roles so that we can apply different tools to the same environmental and social challenges and go faster in terms of outcomes, partnering with many other people. And I'm delighted to have three great co-panelists here who are part of the previous discussion. Let me just introduce them. So to my right, we have Mr. Jason Reynolds. He's the Director of Environmental Affairs at the Southern Company Utility. You do live down in Alabama? Is that where you're based? Okay, headquarters. And he works on programs and strategies that address environmental, regulatory, and legal issues, particularly around energy sector. So welcome, Jason. It's great to have you. We also have Mr. Jeffrey Lewis. He is the Distinguished Scientific Associate in Epidemiology, Health Surveillance, and Quality Assurance for Exxon Mobil Biomedical Sciences. Also, I thought it was interesting, the acronym is EMBASY. I love that. It's a little catchier than that long phrase. And he's the chair of the Embassy Senior Technical Council. So thanks for being with us, Jeff. And last minute addition to the panel, Mr. Bob Skoglund. He is the Director of Product Safety and Regulatory Affairs for Covestro, which used to be Bayer Materials Science. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Am I close? Good. Okay. So welcome. Thanks for joining us. So we had a great discussion in our group. We talked about a few things related to the questions, and maybe we'll just take them in turn. We started with just saying, what's the general reaction of folks about this from an industry perspective? Is this, scale of 1 to 10, something really exciting, or, okay, another initiative? How do you feel about it? And I think in general, it was pretty good enthusiasm. And would love to hear from you about that. And in particular, this question of what do businesses need from an initiative like this? What's going to be useful from an industry point of view? And I'll just say, from a Walmart perspective to start, this is really exciting. We grapple with environmental and human health issues every day. And often what's missing for us is the fact base. It's the science. And I don't remember who spoke this morning. They put up the exhibit that said something around, the magnitude of an issue is a combination of the reality of it plus outrage. And we deal with that a lot as a customer-facing company. A lot of times our customers will get really interested in an issue, and we'll kind of look at it and say, well, we're not sure the science supports that view, but they seem to be concerned about it. And, whereas other things we're really concerned about based on the science we know, and we can't get anyone interested in it. So, from our point of view, this is great. There are so many things we're working on, whether it's climate change or plastics or you name it. We'll come on to topics in a minute. So our temperature take is yes, this is great. Many ways we can benefit. But let me turn to you guys. Would love to hear, your reactions. And you can speak either in terms of your company specifically or just your take on industry in general. What's the reaction and why? What's going to be beneficial?
Thanks, Kathleen. First of all, thank you for having me here. And I think Kathleen had a tough job with us industry people up here, but she did a great job with us in our kind of round table. I think for Southern Company, and I'll give a little background about Southern Company in case of some of you hadn't heard of it. It's an energy provider, and we're dominant in the Southeast, but we generate about 46,000 megawatts of energy a year. And we're in 11 regulated states and 9 unregulated states in our wholesale industry as well. And we generate energy by, coal, by nuclear, renewables, hydros, solar, wind, natural gas, biomass, some of those things there. So we have a diverse portfolio. It's something that we encourage as well. But as you know, when you generate from those different energy mixes, everybody's not happy with it. So we have a vested interest of the air and water and the land that we may impact from that generation. So we have a vested interest to be here. One thing we talk about at Southern Company, and something our CEO challenges is that, we can come up with problems all day long. And what I heard this morning, the common theme through just about every presenter was about solutions. And we're focused on solutions. And if that's what this is about, which I think what I heard this morning, this committee's done a great job with the strategy. So I'm really proud to see that about solutions. And I think there was a young lady in our roundtable, I think Mona, mentioned not just solutions, but how do you implement those solutions as well. So we want to be at the table. We want to have the dialogue around what are those solutions? What are those things that could help us in the energy industry as well? We consider ourselves a leader in that industry, and we don't know all the answers. So having these constructive dialogues is helpful for us. We're quick to say, if you have a problem, what's the proposed solution? Because your proposed solution could generate other thoughts and ideas that can help with a real-time solution to that. So we're excited about it. I think this is something that Southern wants to be involved in. When you're talking about solutions to real-time issues, we need real-time solutions, and I think the committee's done a great job. I know there's probably more than meet the eye as far as what you present today, so I realize there's probably a lot of candid, robust discussions, but we're proud to see what's been laid out so far, and we're looking forward to working with this group going forward.
Thanks, Jason. Jeff.
Yeah. First of all, thank you to the organizers for being part of this, or letting me be part of this very, I think, pioneering and very exciting effort. I think it's quite a compelling and interesting and exciting approach. And I think others have mentioned the problems, scientific problems are becoming more and more complex. It really does take a cross-sector, cross-discipline approach to address these. And as a member of industry, it'd be hard for me to speak obviously for ExxonMobil alone or the industry in general, but it's often very tough to have all the different sectors in the room to sit down in a neutral, trusted space that's of this caliber and trust quality as this academies, and have that scientific discussion in how to address these problems. And I think the idea that there are the solutions, focus as well, and what the problem is, quite appealing. I think very positive. So yes, overall, I think quite an interesting and exciting development, and I'd say we're very positive on being a part of that and it gives the industry the opportunity also to be a constructive contributor to helping solve the problem, because I think, as Tom mentioned and others, a lot of times you're in this regulated industry role, and there's a lot of tension, and sometimes those aren't maybe as constructive a debates and discussions on the science as they could be. And I think this really does offer an opportunity to address that and then try to get to the problem and come up with some good solutions. And I like the systems approach as well. I think that's, given my background in public health and ecology, that has great appeal just individually to me. So overall, I think very positive.
Bob.
Yes, it's a pleasure for me to also be here, but to also be a part of this panel. Michael Witt had another engagement, had to leave, and so Kathleen went deep into the bench.
We pulled an audible. And
I was what
minute.
was left, so she gave the signal for the southpaw to come in, and so I'm filling in. So I really didn't have a chance to prepare much, but I think one of the things that Covestro, as a responsible citizen, a corporate citizen, tries to do is to do the right thing. And so we have our own sustainability and public health, environmental health goals. But one of the things that this initiative can do is to have a broader assessment on the basis of the science as to what are our priorities, what should our priorities be, where should our resources and our investment, both in capital and in intellectual property and innovation, and where should the focus be, and how can we accomplish the most with what we have. And so that's really what I personally was looking for, and what I can't speak for my company, but I certainly think we would be interested in this science-based prioritization of what are the most important issues for us to be working on in this space.
Yeah. And I'd say those are really, common themes across the whole group, just science basis for good decision making and good insight into what are right directions to go. A safe, open, neutral space for dialogue about issues that may be quite contentious, and then an ability to focus on solutions and to do some real problem solving. I love the comments this morning from the engineering perspective, right? Which is whole system change. How can we actually rewire the way that systems work? So that's pretty appealing about this initiative. And, one thing that I think is also a theme that ran through the conversation, and we had the folks here, we also had Jack, who was representing Unilever, so a consumer products perspective. We had Mike from Dow, so chemical company perspectives. So you've got energy, consumer, retail, utilities, and so on. So it was a pretty good mix of industry. Is this sense that as a society, we're beyond this era where it's just about, okay, what's the right thing to do? We actually need solutions that are going to be stable equilibriums from an environmental, social, and economic perspective. And that's one of the reasons I'm so excited about this initiative, to have multiple sectors come together and say, we actually need to figure out solutions to pressing issues that actually work for civil society, that work for citizens, that work for companies, and so on, because those are the solutions that'll be self-sustaining, and I think that's pretty exciting. So we had an interesting starter conversation on, okay, so what are the topics on our minds? And again, caveat is it just happened to be the handful of companies that were in the room. You'd probably get different answers if we had a different mix. But based on the mix of companies that were there were a few things that were top of mind, and I'd love to invite you guys to just comment on them and add some color. So the ones that were top of mind for folks now, plastics. Big issue, especially microplastics, and one where we don't really understand the science. We don't understand the science in terms of human health impacts. So we can go out and see what's going on with birds and fish and sea turtles and get a sense of that. But what is the human health impact of that accumulating plastic? And what do we do about it? So that was one. And that was of interest to the chemical companies and the consumer products and certainly retail. Second one was interesting was climate. So human health impact of climate. I mentioned to the group that we've just done our first climate risk assessment at Walmart. I mean, we've been working on climate for ages, right? But we actually stood back and said, okay, well, let's look at it from that kind of perspective. And we can see out in the future certain impacts around temperature and sea level and drought and so on for things like supply security or facilities cost or what have you. But then what's that next step? How do you translate that into human health impacts? That we don't know how to do, and others maybe have done that, and that would be interesting. We had a conversation, though, about maybe that's not the best issue to take on right out of the gate as the first initiative of this group. So it'd be interesting to hear people's comments on that, just given the receptivity to folks in starting with that. There might be easier things to pick. The third that we talked about was sustainable agriculture. Whether you think about nutrient runoff, emissions, nutrition, yields, there are a host of things that you could look at there. We talked about the nexus of energy and health as maybe a way into something like climate, but you start with something that's a bit more ring-fenced. Transportation. Everything from modes of transportation, new technologies, autonomous vehicles, transportation systems, and human health. So those were some top of mind that we kicked around. Do you guys have any comments on any of those? You want to add some color to those in terms of relative appeal to you guys?
I think you hit it right, Kathleen. I think I gave this example at Southern. We meet with about 25 of environmental groups a year, and we have our CEO Tom Fanning that comes in, and he brings his executives with him, and we have this robust dialogue. And first, we start off about things that we can agree to work on, because there are a lot of things we can work on in our industry than I think the difference of we have in opinions. And then we spend 2 days in this room, and then the next day is kind of more, what are those things we really disagree on, and how can we get to a common accord to work on some of those things there? So I think with starting off with this type of group is, what are those easy wins? What are those low-hanging fruit that we can work together and get some wins and get some momentum going? Now, I think it's oblivious to that if we don't think climate and water quantity and quality and all those things they are going to come up. They are. But I think it's important for us to get some wins and get some momentum going, because I think someone said it, that we're going to all have our biases and things personally we're going to want to see work on. But how do we categorize what are those top 3 or 4 things we need to start off working on and then add to that list going forward? So I think you hit it right within doing that. We got to really prioritize to get to what do we want to focus on first. And can we get some easy wins that can really get some momentum going?
Your comments?
Yeah, I would just add 2 things. First of all, the criteria that are laid out in the strategy, I think, are good to help you sift through these various problems and make sure they really are the wicked problems, right? That's what you want to focus on, these broad, big, multi-sector, multidiscipline problems. So I like the criteria, and I think that's helpful for transparency, too, so the public can see how you're picking these. The other thing we talked a little bit about was there's probably a methodology or a tool development part of this as well, such as health impact analysis, the different ways to approach these. I'm not sure how widely, that's sort of a new area for me, and it doesn't mean everybody else doesn't know it, but I do think there are maybe some methods development as well as part of this to help enable some of this work down the road.
One of the things we talked about was, in order to get wholesale industry participation, there has to be the sense of providing value and alignment with what's important to the different companies or to the industry sectors. And all the topics we talked about certainly align with Covestro. So certainly energy, not energy, but I mean climate change. So we have as one of our goals, obviously, greenhouse gas emission reduction, so there's alignment there. The sustainable agriculture, we're not an agricultural company, but that's an important sector we work in trying to benefit low-income people around food chain and food protection and drying and other types of preserving food within the supply chain. And so food is a big area that we're involved in. And so really all of these things in terms of industry participation, it's the push and the pull. So have the initiative establish what should be important, what we should be working on, but then there's also an alignment with what the industry's priorities already are. And if there's alignment, there's good value, and then there's going to be better participation.
Well, and that's where climate actually, is a really interesting one. We've been working intensely on that, and it's sometimes hard for us to get our customers' attention or interest in it, and that's critical for us to really make progress. So about a year ago, we launched an effort called Project Gigaton, which is inviting our suppliers to join with us to remove a gigaton of emissions cumulatively from supply chains. Because in retail, most of the emissions, it's not scope 1 and 2, it's scope 3. It's the supply chain. And we did the math on our science-based targets, and it works out to about a gigaton between now and 2030 that we need to remove from all supply chains. And so we've got an initiative that we've got a lot of momentum around energy and deforestation and waste reduction and packaging and sustainable agriculture. And we've got different, toolkits. And in fact, EDF's in the room. They're one of our key partners on this thing. We're also working with World Wildlife Fund and Nature Conservancy and practical ways for suppliers to, partner and kind of accelerate impact. But the sixth one, the sixth topic is consumer product innovation. So cold water wash, or switching out light bulbs in the home to LEDs, those kinds of things we want our customers to engage in and really scale up emissions reduction in people's homes. It's hard to talk to people about that because it's not a national conversation. So that's where actually, you know, at some point it would be great if the initiative would take that on and really bring to life, why does it matter for people in terms of their health? Because that's personal, that gets the attention. In addition to all the other reasons, the cost reduction and, you know, other risk mitigation and so on. Any other comments on the topics? Yeah, Bob.
If I can just make a comment on that, it's an interesting point about the whole supply chain and working throughout the supply chain. And that's one of the multipliers or the leveraging that having industry partners in this initiative can be. And so one of our sustainability goals is to really push sustainability upstream within our supply chain. And so set expectations for our suppliers to have sustainability goals that we feel are appropriate. And the targets are very high. I think it's like 97% of spend by 2025 to have suppliers with sustainability goals. And so if you have some certain industries like your company or other people at the table here who have some influence in the supply chain, it can really be a multiplier in terms of making sure the initiative is effective.
Well, that's a good segue to the next topic. So we spent time talking about, all right, what's the value that industry can bring as a partner in an initiative like this? And one of them was certainly that, which is practical action, our own relationships, whether it's with suppliers or with customers, in ways that we can be part of implementation of whatever the topic is. So that was one for sure. We also talked about science and our own insights from science. Do you want to talk about that one a bit, Jeff, as something that industry partners can bring to the table?
Sure, yeah. I mean, well, for example, from my organization, we have epidemiology, toxicology, exposure sciences, ecotoxicology. We've got engineering as well for the solution side. So there's a lot of scientific resources, I think, within the petroleum industry in general. Lots of colleagues in those areas that could be brought to bear into this, I think, probably.
And do you want to comment on that too, Jason? You talked about R&D and different things that you can bring. You've got an institute, research institute.
Yes. At Southern, we've put a lot of our eggs in the basket on R&D. Research and development. We think the next big breakthrough for the energy sector is technology. Whether that's energy battery storage or is that some type of other technology where it's Gen 4 reactors, advanced nuclear, some of those things there. So we're working really hard on the R&D side. We're still one of the only utilities that have a robust proprietary R&D program where we're doing constant R&D research around what are those new technologies to get us to decreasing greenhouse gas emissions and some of those things there. We also have we're a strong relationship and founder of EPRI, Electric Power Research Institute, which does a lot of research as well in the energy sector. And we have these really good relationships with other utilities throughout the country around some of these issues that we're facing. So we think we bring that in some expertise around whether it's air, water, or land, and some of those things there. But we're really focusing on the R&D side of efforts as far as that next breakthrough with technology, if it's more, making solar better or wind or some of those things there. So we have a lot of things going on around the R&D process, and if there's others that want to work with us around research and development around in the energy sector, we're open to that, and we're open to having those dialogues there.
Yeah, and we talked about, depending on the topic, and if it lines up with interests of particular companies or sectors, also opportunity to be field ground for pilots, testing. We're doing some pilots right now across multiple other retailers and suppliers with IBM on blockchain, just to get better visibility in supply chains, things like that. So any other comments on, what can industry bring to the table?
I think and some of the partners, the networking and so forth, we talked about that. Well, I guess that's really the customer suppliers, but other folks
industry
involved in
consortia, trade associations, depending on, the topic and effectiveness, but yeah. Good. Would love to just open it up for questions on any of these topics. We can comment on the perspectives on process too. Yep, Tom.
It was a great session, but at the very end we talked about kind of getting quickly together and having a kind of a rapid response to emerging issues and conversations, and I wish you would say a little bit about that.
Yeah. I'm happy to comment on that. So if you remember earlier this morning when Tom was sharing initial thoughts about this initiative, and you discussed 4 goals, and I believe it was the 4th one was a rapid response capability. We were thinking if there was some type of rapid response lab, so it would be a place where we could come with the pressing issue of microplastics in oceans. Can we get a quick top line view of that? And, maybe it needs further study and so on down the road, but a place to come and get answers to pressing questions that's more than just a conference call with some experts, right? So it would actually be a lab where experts would be brought together and quickly work something through with real science and so on. So there's some meat on it, but it would be a fact-based lab, which we don't have access to right now. And so a lot of times we're just making guesses based on what we know. So I don't know if you guys want to comment on that. Yeah. Yes.
Hi, my name is Pamela Bingham. I'm at Howard University, and I'm also a member of ASCE Civil Engineers and NSBE Black Engineers. So I started my career at a Florida utility, and I've also been in retail since I was in junior high. So that's been my fallback in periods of needing money. What I'm thinking is you've got some real serious competing constituencies when it comes to environmental health. So I was thinking, on the one hand, you have your clients and your customers, but you also have your neighbors, and then your employees, and then your stockholders. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, I've observed all of your companies intimately in one level or another. I have cousins who work for Exxon Mobil for reasons of disclosure. And how do those final decisions get made when it comes to environmental health? You know the record of your industries. There have been complaints for some of you about employees. There have been complaints for others of you about neighbors. So how do you make your environmental health policy, and who gets the last say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go ahead.
It's a loaded question, but it's a great question. Thank you, Pamela.
I was just trying to think through how would I do it, and I know we have law, but ultimately, how do you make the decision at the end of the day?
Yeah, that is great, and thank you for your work that you do at NSBE. I was just there in Pittsburgh a couple of months ago and brought back 2 great engineers. So,
well, I'm in the environmental engineering SIG. We welcome you.
Well, they're a great benefit to our company. I think for us we've had a great shift at Southern Company. I'll just be transparent with you. We have not always been as transparent about what we do in the environmental sector. Like Kathleen said, we just finished our carbon report, and we put it out this year, planning for a low carbon future. And that was a shift for our company, where we talked about it, and we've done these things internally. We had just not shared it in a transparent process of what we do, our scenario analysis, how we take carbon in, and how do we look at things of that nature there. I think it was our CEO, Tom Fanning, who made this really aggressive shift. And I think it was a lot of from the dialogue, and he gave credit to these environmental stakeholders that we meet with every year, helped convince them around some of the things where they're releasing our carbon report. We're also going to participate in CDP this year. We're also going to go down the path.
I'm sorry, I don't know that acronym.
I'm sorry. It's a climate...
Carbon Disclosure Project.
Yeah.
Formerly known as, now CDP.
Yeah.
They dropped the words CDP.
Gotcha.
And we're doing SDGs this year. So
okay, let me just say, I got to stop you.
Yeah.
This is going to be one of the challenges of this commission is everybody's lingo is different. So I understand some of what you all have said, but you all went into some supply chain stuff that I know people in this room, if you don't deal with that, you don't know what you're
We'll need a big glossary translation tool.
SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, in doing that. So I think for us, it was our CEO setting that course and getting us on board with that, because for so long we had not been as transparent. Yeah, we've done all these things. We take carbon price in and some of those things in our scenario analysis. But I think that shift came from our CEO, and it came from the top down, which I think is impactful when you're trying to get all these different departments and organizations in your company that have not done this historically to get on board. So I think that's where it starts at.
What we do is every year we go through our strategy planning process, and we're always looking forward 3 years and then 1 year. So it's sort of rolling. And we do a materiality review. So we engage the different stakeholders you talked about. So customers, associates, shareholders, suppliers, NGOs. We have many partners in the environmental space and social NGO space, governments, and so on. And we take in their perspectives on the issues that we ought to be concerned with. And our view is that ultimately the environmental and the social and the economic are intertwined. You can't separate them. And, short-term, long-term, it all ends up converging. So the choices we're making now will have consequences in the near term. They will have consequences in the long term. So we think it through that way. And based on that, we set priorities across social issues and environmental issues, as well as for our business, marketing and assortment and technology and so on, based on that input. So we've had times when we've done things that in the near term did not work economically, but we knew it was the right thing for the long term. And, in our case in particular, the feedback that we get most, that people are most concerned about in terms of social and environmental, on the social side, it's absolutely economic opportunity for our associates. We have a lot of early stage, lower skilled, first job they came in. How do we help those people get skills to move up? And I could talk all day about what we're doing there.
I thought you were going to say healthcare, but go ahead.
No, well, we offer healthcare. So every associate, part-time and full-time, very affordable healthcare package that's good quality care. We're actually, Harvard just did a case on us because we have specialty centers for knee replacements and those kind of surgeries that everybody gets access to. So we're actually one of the leaders on health that we provide to our people. But one of the things that we did, just as an example to your point, we raised our starting wage to $11 an hour. And when we did that, our share price fell 30% that year because shareholders looked at it and said, why are you doing this? This is a huge cost. And by the way, you're now not going to be a very profitable retailer and we should go invest in somebody else for 5 years. And, we probably could have done a better job making the case about why that made sense beyond just being a good thing for our associates. And we've now been able to prove improvements in retention, improvements in availability on shelf and customer service, and the mobility of our people, which makes them, more engaged and productive. So sometimes it is tough. There are near-term trade-offs, and you have to make that case. You have to explain it, and you can't do everything at once. But that's a constant thing that we're navigating. We actually write about this in detail in our global responsibility report, the way we set our priorities and how we make trade-offs. So I'd encourage folks to take a look at that. That's online.
So,
Are
Kathleen,
we out of time?
I think we're going to have to move on.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry for those who waited.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it, especially you at last minute. Thank you.